So today's agenda is introduction to Anypoint platform. So which has different components in it. So we'll go one by one, and we will not going in deeper current now, but we can go in deeper in later sessions. So I'll just give the intro what this component is. So you can see my screen. So Anypoint platform, the components are divided into categories. So one is Anypoint Design Center. In that design center, it has Anypoint Studio, then Anypoint API Designer, then Connector Dev Kit. Then Anypoint Management Center, it has Runtime Manager, then API Manager and API Analytics. And in Anypoint Exchange, it's like a asset. Then we can once we develop any API or application that's are deployed in Anypoint Exchange. So in our organization or all MuleSoft team can view that API, and that can be used by anyone. Then this is the Mule runtime engine. There our application runs. Then Anypoint connector, which has 120 plus connector available. So we can use that connector to connect the end system like SaaS application, Salesforce, NetSuite. Then it's having runtime services that are running. And this is the actual our API-led connectivity comes. So yesterday we discussed about these layers, system, process, and experience layer. So I want to show something. This is the diagram that I found when I Google it. So in traditional approach, suppose we want to develop any application, then we need, and there are different applications currently. Then if we want to connect to LDAP server, then there has to be mechanism besides that to connect that LDAP system. Then for HR application, so there may be using like queue. Then payroll system, it's again using some mechanism to connect that payroll system, and some other external applications which may use web services. Then in second diagram for actually we'll be creating one middleware like a Mule application, and which will create connector which will call the actual end systems. So in this system API is existing, and this our Mule application, nothing but the ESB will communicate to our application. So we can discuss more in what Mule application is. So here you can see that so our Mule application start, then it will call the LDAP server to fetch the records for user. Then it will do some transformation like process APIs, and it will again call the HR service, HR application, which will get the details. Then we'll enrich that message and pass to the next processor. Then it will call payroll system. Then likewise external applications. Then it will transform some fields which are our target systems field. Then it will give as a output. Then you can see the left here. This is the sample flow that we can build with the help of Anypoint Studio. So this is the message source which will trigger the flow, our flow. Then it will call our LDAP application. So likewise, all endpoints will be called, and later then it will send the response back to our caller. This is the sample discussion on how Mule comes into picture. In previous in this example, these are tightly coupled applications. And the second diagram shows that how we are creating those connector to connect those systems. So this is the reusability mechanism, what we can say. So if anybody wants to connect LDAP server, then they can directly call this system API, which we have built previously. Then second, how our application is building. So firstly, suppose we are targeting only customer 360 projects, which has SAP, MySQL, and Salesforce endpoints. So we'll build integration for this type of connectors. So here you can see that we have created 3 system APIs, which will connect to our endpoint. And on top of it, we created one process API, which will communicate all these 3 system APIs. So this is our first project in our application network. In later onward, suppose we would like to add another application, which web ordering project. Here you can see that we have created system APIs for order for .NET. Then on top of that system API, we'll created 2 process APIs, order one and order fulfillment. And here you can see that in previously we designed one process APIs for accounts detail. In web order project, we are using that system process APIs in it. Then likewise, later we need to create notification project for web ordering projects. So we created notification, and inside that we connected to actual Facebook, Gmail, and Twilio for notification purpose. Then we created one process API for notification. Then we created another project for inventory management, which will communicate NetSuite, SAP, and MySQL. So here you can see that. So we have created twice for Salesforce one. So instead of creating another connection for SAP, we'll be directly calling this process API account, which will indirectly communicate with our actual SAP. So here reusability comes into picture. Then again for MySQL one. So this is how our application network is growing. And these are the again another example that we have created experience layer for shopping cart and mobile omni-channel, which will communicate to our process APIs and system APIs. Then this is the platform for business as a service. So we discuss about this application owner, which is nothing but central IT, then LOB, dev, and innovation team. So here in application network, application owner will create some orchestration which will communicate to our actual end system, and which is nothing but the contract between to that actual endpoint, that how this connector can be exposed as a service. That means which are the options user can perform on that service. Then it's come under process APIs like agility and new value creation. Suppose we want to connect two different systems, then we can create one process APIs. And on top of that process APIs, innovation and digital projects using that actual system APIs. So here you can see that in top, so we have created 3 experience layer, which will directly communicate to our accounts API. So likewise, this platform for business as a service will continue. Then this is the full lifecycle integrated platform. Then yesterday we saw the one diagram for API lifecycle. So we targeted this design, dev, and test, deploy, and operate. So these are the components that we are using for building any successful API, and which will be engaging with the help of this platform. Like you can say that for designing purpose, we use API designer. Then once we design that API, we'll mocking, uh, we provide the mocking services for that API. Currently, we are not directly dealing with actual endpoint. We'll be creating some sample request and response. Then we'll deploy this API to API portal. Then our developer can use that APIs and give the feedback about that API. Once we finalize that API, then development comes into picture. So development can be done using Anypoint Studio and Flow Designer. And testing purpose, we can use EM unit. Then for deploying purpose, we can deploy those application in Runtime Manager. Then we'll create API notebook, which is used for developer to understand the API, and developer can play with that API.
Mahesh, I just
Yeah.
wanted to come in here to give maybe a little bit more clarity to the entire team. So, if I may decompose a little bit what Mahesh is saying here, this is about the API section or API domain of MuleSoft. So what MuleSoft gives you is a capability of quickly publishing the API to the API consumer without having to worry about what comes as an actual data from the backend. So the design stage itself, we could, the tool allows you through the RAML specification that you could build and stand up a mock service. And within the RAML, it gives you the feature of provisioning a request and a response, HTTP authentication and header sections. Also, some JSON payload, JSON or XML, whichever payloads, so that from a consumer point of view, this can be, they can move forward in writing the code, whether it's on a UI application or on a third-party consumer service. They can start writing the code. They don't need to wait till the integration developer builds all the backend services. So to give you an example, let's say if you want order information from SAP and you need an API for that, let's say you want finally an experience API saying that get orders, post orders, get all orders, get order status. Those are the calls that you may need from a consumer perspective. So the mock service allows you to quickly design those APIs without having to deal with any backend connection to SAP or even any of those orchestration layers. So you can quickly turn it around within hours or day back to the consumer saying that here you go, this is your API. Hit the API. These are the standard methods that are available, whether it's a get, post, patch, put, whatever that is. And these are the responses that you will get. This is the authentication that you should use. These are the headers or URI parameters, things like that you would require. So this is a playground that they can use as consumer. And who's a consumer here? Consumer could be a UI developer. Consumer could be a third-party application developer. A consumer could be an external gateway. Whoever is a consumer, the consumer can now start building their part of the work, while now we are building the back end of it, which is the SAP connections and all of that. So Mule gives you an option to enable or turn on the mock service, and you will see those, I think, as you move forward. So you can turn on and turn off mock services, which will communicate, which will make the API up and running. At the same time, there's no backend to it. It's just within the RAML, within the default responses, it's going to talk to the consumer. And while it's done, while the mock service is running, then you go ahead and do the dev and test. So I'm talking about here, if you look at the diagram there, you have a design and then you have a dev and test. In the dev and test, the actual orchestration build happens. So where you now bring up Anypoint Studio, use the SAP connector, whatever business logic, whatever aggregation of data, and all those that is required to filter, to orchestrate, to do validation rules, to connect to the endpoints. Maybe you need to connect to SAP and another database. Maybe you need to call another service along with SAP to enrich that order data. So all that happens in the dev phase with the Mule ESB while the API is up and running. So once you build the again, I'm assuming here that Mule Anypoint Studio gives you the capability. You can import whatever mock API that the specification rather, the RAML specification that you have defined in your API can be used as a skeleton or as a frame to build your orchestration layer. So the Anypoint Studio gives you the capability of importing that specification and build your orchestration layer. So it gives you a structure and then build around it. That's an option that's available. So by that, you are using, first of all, one tool, which is Anypoint Studio, to build both the API and the integration layer. Second, you are also using the specification of the API to structure your Mule flow and then bring in all the rest of the components, which is your connectors, your data validation, your data enrichment, your business logic, all of that. And once that's all done, you test those and you're satisfied with it, you can now deploy this in a way that now this is going to communicate with your API. This becomes your API. So you can turn off the mock service once you're ready with this, and seamlessly for the end user who's a consumer of this API, he wouldn't even know where this data is coming from. Is it a mock or is it an actual? Because the transition is so seamless. That is a great way of doing things, so that you, as an integration developer and as a UI developer, both of you are at work and not one person is waiting for the other. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Thought of explaining
perfectly.
Yeah, we'll give that demo, that how we can design that API and how we can import that API spec into our studio, and how to implement that actual business logic and deploy that application into Cloud Hub, and then how this will happen. That will see actual live demo. So this is the single platform that is a single solution for APIs and integration. So it's ASB and it supports SOA architecture. Then it supports pub and sub, then ETL, then SaaS applications, then API management, then business to business, then IoT and microservices. So these are the all possibilities that we can use that in our platform. So you may have a question like how we can get that access, right? So you can go to anypoint.mulesoft.com and just create a trial account, which is 30 days trial, and we can get full access of each component. So you can see that this is the home page for Anypoint platform, so which has design center, so which is used for creating new applications and APIs. It will create virtual flows and API specification for we can using this design center. So which again it has web designer, then API designer, and you can see the right. It contains management center, which has access management, which will manage our users, business groups, and audit logs. So I want to comment this audit log in further. Like App Connect, we have Web Management Console, where we can see the actual logs that uh, which user has just login out into WMC, then which are the projects that we are running, and it will audit the logs. Then in API Manager, which is used for restricting to our APIs, like providing SLA layers, then add some policies into it, then fix some alerts, then create some application for securing those applications. Then Runtime Manager, it's actually is used for deploying our built mule application. Then Data Gateway, it access to a Salesforce Connect. Then Visualizer, Secret Manager. Then this is the Exchange, where our reusable APIs are discovered and shared, connector and templates. So, and this is our Anypoint Studio, that it's IDE, which is built on Eclipse. So we can use that. So here you can see that uh, we are into access management, and you can see the audit logs. So in that audit logs, we can get the details about which user login and what that user perform operation. So let me log in into that platform. See, I just log in into a platform, so it created entries into audit logs. Suppose I want to go in design center. If I created any API into design center, then automatically logs will be created over here, that you just created one API and which has some filters around it. So it's like a product. There's API design we just hit, right? Then types, branch, owner ID, projects, then it's action, that what kind of actions we just hit. So here, this is the options that we can create mule application, API specification, and API fragment. We'll go details in next our series of sessions. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So these are the operations in design center that we can use these options. So we'll go in details in our series of sessions, that how we can create a API specification, then how we can create API fragment, and how we can create mule application. Then we'll comes into Exchange. So you can see that these are the types of assets that we can search. So here you can see that, so this is the lexicon, which is my private exchange, and this is the public exchange provided by MuleSoft, which has a number of assets already built. So we can use that any API spec and all. And here you can see that public portal. So once we design any API and we want to make discoverable to any developer, then we can deploy that asset into Exchange, and we'll just make it as a public. So this that APIs comes under public portal. So any developer can use that API. So here you can see that there are lots of assets like connector, templates, examples, REST APIs, SOAP, HTTP, API fragments. So we'll go in detail in next series of session. So make sure you may aware of this type of components that we are having, like runtime manager.
Mahesh, I have a
Yeah.
question.
Mhm.
So the any hosting or deploying rather of the APIs can only be done by through the Cloud Hub, correct?
For API designing one?
No, for the deployment.
No,
Yeah.
it can be done in our studio also.
I'm talking about deployment.
Yeah.
Finally, the deployment, can it happen on-prem within our environment,
Yes.
or should it be always be in Cloud Hub?
No, they have provided two options that we can create our on-prem environment, or we can use this cloud hub.
Okay, so both are available.
Yeah, both are available,
So
but
the difference, and I'm just comparing here, the difference between Jitterbit and this is that Jitterbit, you just have to deploy it at one location, your APIs,
Mhm.
which is the Harmony. You don't have a choice of hosting elsewhere, your APIs. Whereas in MuleSoft, you still have the option of hosting it in your on your on-prem environment or in Cloud Hub.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these are the environments that MuleSoft provides. We can create environment in it. So
Yeah,
so
this
this,
is all in the Cloud Hub,
yeah,
right?
yeah, it's all
Yeah.
already on cloud hub.
Yeah.
But when we create our on-prem deployment, then some of the features may not be accessible.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Because the Cloud Hub automatically gives you HA capability
Yeah.
and load balancers and
Hmm.
such features, right?
Yeah.
Whereas on your on-prem, you need to take care of all those, or even if you want such high availability options, then you need to create a cluster or create nodes and
Hmm.
ensure that deployment. So there is a way to do it, but using Cloud Hub, it gives you, and also I believe this comes with a gateway, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm not sure about that. Jitterbit gives you a default gateway, similar to what IBM has as a data power.
Hmm.
Jitterbit gives you a default gateway. Cannot do much with it. It's a built-in embedded gateway, but it gives you that the security layer access.
Yes. And this API manager is used for securing our APIs.
Yeah.
So it
So
again has
the
policies
team,
in
I
this.
just wanted to again give you another insight into into APIs. Okay.
Hmm.
So API building is one thing. You can build APIs, and most of you would have done API building in one of the platforms that whether you use Java to build APIs, whether you use other Node.js based frameworks to build APIs. Building APIs is not new. It's been in the industry for many years in different using different protocols, right from the EJB world to where we are to the REST world. What is important when it comes to APIs is managing those APIs. If you're not able to manage your APIs, institute proper controls, access controls, uh, and also other parameters like thresholds and spike arrest and things like that, and governance, overall governance around it, it'll become a disaster. So building APIs is a good thing, but if you cannot manage the APIs, it will become a disaster. Why? For many reasons. One, you need to have very stringent procedures for access control. If not, anybody can access this. Or if it's just a basic authentication that you have embedded, cracking that is pretty easy. You also need to control network level access. So how do you do all of that? So then if your tool does not have capability, then you have to depend on other parameters like network infrastructure management or external gateways like data power, and so on and so forth. So an API management tool or an API runtime engine should have the governance capability around it, which will first control the access. So access control is so important. Second, you should also have authentication, right from OAuth protocols to everything else. However, the authentication should look like, whether it's based on the type of exposure the API has. You need to have all the provisions of right from your basic auth to OAuth 2.0 and everything in between. The third factor is you need to have visibility as to who's accessing what API. So the entire analytics around it is so important, so that you're able to see, okay, where is this traffic coming from? I've restricted my APIs to certain people or certain access levels, but still I want to know all sorts of graphs and reports how my API is behaving, how my API is being consumed, what kind of data access is happening through this. Because once you publish the API, you are pretty much out of the picture. Somebody else is going to use it. So those visibility and analytics around API is also important. Another factor, which is again a very critical factor, is that when you publish API, or as a provider of an API, you should have a fine-grained control over how this API is accessed by people. So if I'm saying that, okay, when I'm using an example, Vishal, let's say, is running a department, and if I'm provisioning this API for Vishal's department to use, I should set some rules saying that, hey, Vishal can only hit this API 10 times in 1 hour. Why do I do that? So that not everybody consumes this API and brings the infrastructure down. So a more fine-grained access control there to the API gives us as an infrastructure control as to who and how the API is accessed by individuals or teams in the organization. So what does that give you is basically, if somebody wants to bring down this infrastructure, all they have to do is write a small program and hit this API every second. The infrastructure will come down because you don't have an unlimited capacity. You have a limited capacity in your provisioning infrastructure. So by giving access to this API without control, without authentication, without governance, will not be the best scenario. I hope you guys are getting what I'm saying and where I'm going with this. So that is why it's so important to have the API manager and the runtime manager and the visualizer and the authenticator and the gateway important, because you are up to something. It's like you're hosting something on the public internet. It's good to, it's easy to host. Even if you have a home server and a static IP, even without a static IP, you could do that. You can host pretty much everything. But then you can see within days or hours, Somebody else is controlling this machine, not even you. So that's where it's important that when you publish something, when somebody else is going to consume your infrastructure, especially in the case of APIs, for sure, you're not consuming it, you're hosting it, you're a provider, that this is well managed, well controlled, and you have all visibility into it so that you can fully take control of how the deployment is behaving. That's it.
I have a really maybe a very silly question. Like, so when we talk about system APIs, when we talk about process APIs and experience APIs, um, you know, which APIs we are right now talking about? Like, are we gonna securing all those things, or
Yeah.
is there something from
Is
an
that a
experience
question
point of
for
view?
me?
Yes.
Okay, so the way I would answer again from a non-MuleSoft perspective at this time, as I said, I'm not an expert in MuleSoft, is that you do have different levels of APIs,
Mm-hmm.
but that does not um, exclude any of the API infrastructure from governance, right? So if you have your system APIs, let's say you have your CRUD APIs, right?
Mm-hmm.
On top of the objects. Those APIs also will have the same level of governance like any other experience APIs. Now, will you expose your system APIs to the, let's say your infrastructure, the whole infrastructure has got both internal and external access scenarios. So I will not be exposing, if I'm an infrastructure person, I will not be exposing my system APIs to the outside world.
Mm-hmm.
I will only provision system APIs for developers who are in this case, in this diagram, the line of business. Those are the only people who will have access. This is why it's important that each API should have the governance, or each layer should have its own governance, right? So same infrastructure is used, same API managers are used, but for the system APIs, I would say the access is granted to subnet so-and-so, and the subscription, like, through the APIs portal, only they can subscribe. Only this particular department, which is, let's say, the marketing department and the manufacturing department of this business unit can access this API because they are going to build the process APIs, right? So the governance there would be, I'm provisioning access on the system APIs only to that layer. So if anybody else wants to even hit this API, it will reject. It will reject, sorry, you don't have access, or you don't have privilege to even execute anything in the backend. And then for the process APIs, again, you use the same runtime manager to provision the access. Now, process APIs may be, some of them will be exposed. Let's say you have an order creation process, right? Order creation process can be executed or consumed by a UI, which is your e-store. An e-store is built by, let's say, Gabriel. So an e-store is built by Gabriel. So you will provision access for this order what did I say? Order process? Yeah, order process API to Gabriel, because he's building a UI or an application, which is an e-store. But then tomorrow a requirement comes that, hey, by the way, there's a partner system outside our network would like to use the order process API so that you can do B2B. So what you will do, you may provision specifically that particular API through the gateway, provision a further access. And when the other difference, when I give access to Gabriel, I may only have him do a basic authentication. Whereas when I'm exposing this to my partner, now I will ask him, you have to use OAuth. So I can provision it in a way that now this API is exposed as an OAuth. Now, two different options again I can say that, Gabriel, we have enhanced our security. You need to now use OAuth even internally to consume this. Or I can say a version of internal API will have only basic authentication, and the version of external exposed version will have OAuth provisioning. So again, what does it? It gives you a granular level of control over your APIs, whether it's a system API, process API, or experience APIs, to provision governance around it. Did that answer you, Vishal?
I mean, but it's really contradictory. Basically, like, one side we are talking about, utilizing the resource properly, and at another side, I mean, in order to secure these, while chunking it down, or like splitting it down into three different layers, and then adding the API management and the API designer and all those tools to just to control it, like to one side we are shielding the database resources, and other side we are building a whole network, again, or a set of servers to just shield those.
Yeah, I think we will better understand this when we have a large environment. This is where initially I said, "Oh, this is an ideal architecture." Not every organization need to go this route in terms of the different layers. Maybe there is some level of convergence depending on the size of the organization. But when you are talking about a regulated industry like bank, financial services, or even a large-scale implementation like an airline industry, you will soon realize how important it is to have these level of the layers of APIs and the access levels that you need to have, because there are multiple systems that would access the same resource. There are multiple applications and consumers. I mean, think about the airline industry. You can do a web search in Expedia, right? These are all going in at different layers. How many layers? Finally, it's hitting some database somewhere, right?
Yes.
So all of this is available for you and me for public use, but think about the infrastructure needed behind it. This is all coming from a back-end application. This is all behind firewall, somewhere hidden. So how important it is to have those levels of access and layers of access, so that there is no intruder coming in, there is no hacking, there is no one person can bring down the infrastructure, because it's all now public. So what I'm saying is, we may not see the full why it's too complicated, right? But as I said, not in all scenarios you need to go this extensive. But there are industries, there are areas where you have tens of thousands of people, and you have an IT which is shared and managed, and then you're trying to build an API economy on top of that. That is a challenge. Now, that'll take years. I heard a story of Air Canada when I went to a conference, and they're using Mule, by the way. So I went to a Mule conference, and they were telling us the story of how they're building the application network. And I think this is probably, if you search, you may find this as a public case study, maybe.
Yeah.
They're 2.5, 3 years into the project, right? They're still in the process of shifting from a legacy infrastructure to a API economy infrastructure. It will take ages for an industry like that to really convert. But then when you do that, this is a job of an architect or a set of architects, where they will sit down and see, really, how do we want to build this infrastructure? What kind of reference pattern we need to use? Do we strictly use the Mule reference architecture here in terms of system APIs, process APIs, and experience APIs? And I believe Air Canada did go very much the Mule way of reference architecture. So again, once we get into an industry like that, it makes more sense why we need it. Hopefully, again, and that's all what I can say now. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I want to highlight some points that
Yeah, go
all
ahead.
the all the videos and documents are available in uh, anypoint.milsoft.com website. So they have explained how the application network is built. We with use a proper case study, and they
Good.
have,
That's good to
yeah,
know.
they have provided some white paper for that. So
Yeah, yeah.
we can
Share
go through
those.
that. Yeah.
Share the rather than everybody searching on different things. Maybe these important things you can share in the group chat, or I think in the group chat is fine. Just
Yeah.
give it a label and say this is what it is, right?
Okay.
So that'll give us, me, Vishal, and others, a better understanding of why this architecture is relevant.
hmm And yesterday I just shared this PDF file to everyone. So all the components level, so they have explained more detail. So you can go through this document. So you will get more clarity about what actually API designer is, then what is runtime. So we'll go in detail in next series of sessions. So you may have access to this PDF to go through. So you will get the clarity about what this component do. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So that's it for today's session.
Okay. So as a takeaway, I think firstly, does anybody have difficulty in accessing the shared drive? What Mahesh has shared yesterday? If yes, then let us know. Second, I believe with today's session, Mahesh has said that we all need to log into the Anypoint platform, so the everybody can do it from their account. It's basically you get a 30-day trial. Let's start off there. What else, Mahesh, as access and things that we need that participants should do?
Yeah,
Uh,
just go through each and
Reviewing
every
of
component.
content.
Huh?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just I was saying that. So go through each and every component that we discussed today, and you will get more clarity on it. If you have any doubts on any component, please let us know so we can discuss in our next session.
Okay. Guys, I want to open up for questions. Like Vishal asked, do you guys have any questions on the topic discussed today or any related comments? I don't want to go around the table every day, but please come in. As I said, this is an interactive session. Any thoughts, comments, feedback, questions are welcome. We always keep the last 10 to 15 minutes for that. We want to keep that, so that your experience, your input is vital for us to all learn this together. So I'm opening it up for anybody who has questions.
Simple question. The Anypoint, you said that we get a free trial for 30 days, correct?
Yes.
I was thinking that we're probably going to need more than 30 days to kind of practice.
So you need
I'm
to
guessing
read,
we're going to open a new account after the first 30 days.
but you can use the same email ID, but you need to create another different username
Okay,
for
that's
that.
all going to. Is it easy to constantly re-sign up? Okay. All
Yeah,
right, that's
and
good. If it's
you
easy,
can
then it's
import previously built artifacts into new account. So there is the
Oh, that's
oh,
nice.
yeah,
nice,
That's
nice.
nice.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was saying because I know we're gonna need more than 30 days. So I
yeah.
was hoping that it's
My,
an
my
easy.
assumption, UD, is that hopefully within that 30 days or within the 60 days for sure, we will all have the accounts, because by the time I believe we all will be going through that enablement program, right? So we will have a partner access by then.
Oh, okay, okay, good, okay, cool. All right.
Anything else, Judy, from your side?
No. I was just gonna comment that I believe I think bullet 2 was just showing us the SATA architecture because I kind of did some research on that a little bit. I think the slide, I think it was the second slide that Mahesh shared with us. That was just them trying to compare the existing, architecture and what adding the Mule architecture, which is a stage event-driven architecture. The difference between the two. I just, thought I made a comment on that, but that was what I think was showing the difference between both architectures. Just a comment in case anyone wants to share.
Okay.
But I guess if you read the document, you can kind of see that they were going to stage event-driven. It helps you decouple events that way you can reuse and stuff like that. But that's
Correct.
what, to me, bullet 2 showed. It showed existing. You would have to do things one by one and wait. Versus, the second part on the right was basically the I think it's pronounced SATA architecture. So just that I make a comment on that.
Yeah, good. And I've also seen that, comparing the three products, the IBM, Jitterbit, and Mule, I'm not sure because of this particular event-driven architecture. It also supports, in Anypoint Studio, it supports parallel execution.
Yes.
I hope
it supports the parallel execution.
Yeah, it supports parallel execution, and in the ESB world, and anybody who has worked on ESB would understand about the scatter and gather.
Scatter gather. Yeah.
So that's one of the primary component that they use. Very effective.
Basically, that's the the core of SEDA. Basically, if we say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to kind of point at, right? So
you can go off, do different things, but then come back.
Yes.
Correct.
And collaborate those, request and response, and then send it out.
Yeah.
And then that's why you're able to.
You can really go very extensive on that. It's wonderful. So once we get into it, you will see the power of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Very powerful. And the other differentiator that I have seen, Jitterbit kind of does it, but not in a SOA driven architecture. App Connect does not have the capability. Is the message persistence and the ESB capability. So Mule is a true ESB, versus the other two are more point-to-point integration or a hybrid integration tool.
So that's what I was thinking too. It's like Mule is App Connect expanded, improved with a lot more functionality.
Yudi, your voice is muffled a little bit. Could you repeat that?
Can you hear me better?
Yeah.
No, I was just saying that yes. When I'm looking at things, I'm thinking that MuleSoft is a vastly improved.
You're again going in and out.
Okay, hang on. Let me try with the speaker. Hang on.
Yuri, I think I heard you, but I mean, it's not good to compare these two tools, because MuleSoft is a giant altogether, and App Connect is like small,
Yeah. App Connect is like a subset, a small.
I mean, it's really, 5%. 5% of it.
I wouldn't. Again, it's very dangerous to comment that way. But
no, I mean, again,
the way I would position is Mule is an ESB.
Yes.
It's got all it's a heavyweight component, which also means that building and designing and building and the whole life cycle of a Mule flow is way different than what you have in App Connect or Jitterbit, right? You cannot give Mule to a small to medium sized company having what we call a citizen developers or integration developers. They can just pick it up and go. No, this is more of a traditional way of doing things, with the some level of acceleration because it's got the connectors, it's got the UI, it's got drag and drop components, but it's still more traditional way of building things, where you sit down, build up an architecture, you position the components, you think about how the messaging in your infrastructure goes, how do you want to handle persistence, all of that. Versus in App Connect, you want to build a flow, here you go, 2 hours, your flow is up and running. That's a totally different architecture. There is a space for App Connect slash Jitterbit. That is why they are selling, right? Why are customers buying those? Is because they have their own space and advantages. Pricing wise as well, it's again not apples to apples. So Mule is a heavyweight. Mule is built on a solid foundation and architecture of ESB. App Connect is built on a solid foundation and architecture of SOA based, but point-to-point integration, connector enabled, no coding. So make it simple, straightforward, and get your job done quickly. That's the kind of infrastructure that App Connect slash Jitterbit has. Make it up and running in days, in hours, versus that's not the objective of Mule. This is for high volume processing, persistence, messaging, ESB, and of course everybody is now coming up with the API economy as well, or the API management. So yeah, so two different things here, but there's a lot of commonalities between these tools. Everybody has connectors to SaaS, everybody has connectors to backend, everybody has got logics built in, error handling, things like that. But again, Mule is very extensive in nature, which also opens up door for errors. You cannot build an App Connect flow and go into an error situation. It's not possible, right?
Yeah.
I mean, logical errors, yes, but no other. But you build a flow in Mule, you will sit and wonder sometimes for hours where is the problem.
Yeah.
Because you're opening up doors for
Because it's really open-ended, you can do Python, you can do Groovy, you can do MELs, and then when you are adding these things, you better be ready.
you're adding complexity, basically.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And Jitterbit is somewhere in the middle, I would say. Jitterbit is slightly open-ended.
I mean,
Does-
they did try to create the system as a service oriented. Basically, when we talk about Jitterbit, there are operations, like
Yeah.
from this particular activity to this, and that particular service is ready. You can call that particular microservice or that small service differently from within the operations or from project or outside the projects. Yeah.
Where the way I see it is, the advantage that we have is we are looking at 3 different architectures.
Mhm.
And the good news is that we, at least some of us and many of us know all 3, right?
Yes.
So each tool has got its advantages. Each tool has got its segment to position in terms of market segment. And here we are learning all 3, which is good news, right? Everybody, the way I see it is Jitterbit has spent years of research into what they have built and what they have believed as a solution, and I like it. When I started working with Jitterbit, I was really impressed how they put all this together and trying to build a unique platform there. Mule is, again, I'm going back to what I was working with, like an Oracle SOA or an IIB kind of infrastructure, where it's again traditional approach with some newer UI, but in the backend it's extremely traditional in its approach. And what traditional doesn't mean old. Traditional means foundational, and very much with the concepts and fundamentals of how messaging infrastructure works, how uh, data and information flows from one point to the other, the failure tolerance of it, the the delivery once mechanism, the persistence in flight, all of that. A lot, many details that goes into it in terms of its middleware solution. Whereas the others, once you pick up the message, you deliver it, that's it, you're done. You're not in the picture. Not in Mule. Mule still holds everything, and traceability and playback and all, a lot of features that you can enable there. Very extensive. Okay, that's it, guys. Anybody else want to come in? Or Gabriel, welcome. Thanks for joining, and hope these sessions would definitely be a insight for you as well. If you're speaking, we cannot hear you because I saw you go off mute.
Oh, hi. Thank you.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay.
I was just saying, hopefully the sessions are giving a good insight.
Yep, that's for sure.
Good. Okay. Okay, if we don't have any other comments, we can close this call. Vishal, do you want to close the call with final comments?
No, I mean, I think I already discussed, like, we learned about, today, mostly from an API, management side and the Cloud Hub options. So please go through whatever is, you can do with the Cloud Hub login. And please feel free to post any questions related to that if you have any over the group chat, and we'll try to come up with it. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll meet tomorrow, guys. Have a
All right,
good
thanks, guys.
have a good day.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.